On this day, in 1926, it was business as usual at the Nerang Quarry. The men were carrying out a contract for the Queensland Main Roads Board and were in the process of quarrying rock and gravel for the construction of the new Beechmont Road nearby. For some years prior, the local ratepayers of the area, including the Nerang Progress Association, had been pressuring the Nerang Shire Council to expedite the construction of a new road between Nerang and Beechmont. The largely unsealed road between the two localities created hiccups for residents and was particularly problematic for fruit growers and dairy farmers in their attempts to truck their bananas and cream into Nerang for distribution to market. With funding becoming available and contracts up for tender in late 1925, George Giddy, a highly experienced road construction contractor from Mooloolaba, was quick to take advantage of the opportunity. The day before, 5 explosive charges were set in the quarry to blast the rock into manageable pieces. On detonation, the first 3 charges were heard distinctly, whilst the 4th and 5th seemed to detonate simultaneously with an extra loud bang. Wanting to let the rubble settle, the crew packed up their tools and planned on returning the next morning to begin clearing and loading the blasted rock onto 2 drays they'd procured for the purpose. At about 9:30 in the morning on the 30th of March, the crew of 7 returned, picks and shovels in hand, and moved on to the blasted rock pile to begin their work. The contractor, George Giddy, swung his pick into the pile with unbelievably disastrous consequences. Despite the crew's assumptions the day before, one of the explosive charges had failed to detonate, and George managed to land his pick directly on it. The subsequent explosion tore through both the rubble pile and the work crew. The best part of George was blown 80 feet or almost 25 metres over the heads of his workmates and landed in a nearby paddock. Of the remaining workers, Jack Buckley had his nose and face horribly smashed by flying rubble, whilst Alexander Duncan had 3 of his fingers practically blown off and suffered a fractured right elbow, fractured ribs, lacerations, bruises and severe shock. In all, 3 suffered critical injuries whilst another 2 bordered on serious. With no way of contacting the authorities to alert them of the accident or calling for urgent medical aid, one of the men commandeered a horse from one of the drays and briskly rode the 3 miles back to Nerang to raise the alarm. 2 ambulances and a doctor were immediately rallied, and the party returned to the quarry in haste. The injured workers were rushed to a nurse's residence at Nerang, whilst investigators recovered George's remains. It was reported that the concussion of the explosion was so great, George's clothing had been pushed into the wounds he'd sustained. Additionally, 2 of the other men were found practically naked, having had their clothes torn away by the force of the blast. Tragically, one of these men, George's friend Alexander Duncan, died from his injuries early the next morning, having been transferred north by train to the Brisbane General Hospital.